So, yeah, no sleeping, right? Everybody have a good meal. So, Billy tagged me with uncertainty in ministry. And when I first saw that, I was like, well, that's interesting. But then I understood what he was talking about. And so I'll probably get to speak for myself and Billy and Nick a little bit here. But uncertain in ministry. You ever get in a place where you're uncertain, right, in ministry? So I've finished 6 years at Hendrick Motorsports, ministering to people, being a chaplain, teaching, leading people, weddings, funerals, you name it, workplace mediation. And there's a lot of uncertainty sometimes when you're dealing with people. But imagine this. It's 2020, it's March 12th, and I've chosen to fly to Portland, Maine, because at HMS we had an employee that was very close to us that left to go to another race team. He had a cardiac event working on a surface plate. He lost oxygen to his brain for like 7 minutes and was in a coma for 3 months. And he actually used to come to the fellowship lunch we had, and so people kept reaching out to me. Hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about so-and-so? And I said, yes. And, I heard it so much from people, they were like, maybe you need to go see his family. And he was at a hospital here in town, and so I went up, and basically, of course, I couldn't talk to the employee because he's in a coma, but he was not doing well. And so I met his parents and basically just offered my services if they need a minister in their life. Now, you got to remember, they're from Maine. So they had to come down here and spend 3 months in a hospital. And eventually they decided to have him flown back up to Maine. He eventually did wake up, but he was fully paralyzed at the moment. And so it was some months into his rehabilitation that he wasn't doing well, and they wanted me to fly up and see if I could encourage him. He was depressed, suicidal. So it's March 12th, 2020, and I'm in Maine, and I'm going to therapy with him, and we're having a good time, and I'm seeing smiles, and we're just trying to lift his spirits. And then there's this thing, COVID comes up. Y'all ever heard of the COVID issue in 2020? It's March the 15th. They're shutting all the airports down, and they're trying to find a way to get me home because I'm in Maine. And it wasn't in the summer, so I was like, I don't want to stay here. We don't know what's going on. They had decided to rent a car and drive me to Charlotte if they had to, but I got on one of the last flights out. I flew home on a Sunday and then got a call from HMS that said, hey, don't bother coming over here. We're closed. Y'all remember that, right? It shut the world down. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll get a couple days here and we'll be off. That was 24 weeks for me. 24 weeks I was not allowed to go back to Hendrick Motorsports. That is called a vacation. But the reason I bring that up is the uncertainty of that, because the first week or two wasn't that bad. Weather was great down here. I got to spend time with my family. I got to spend time just really decompressing. But then all the racers went back to work. And then we did this thing called entertainment for all you sitting at home where we raced with no fans. But the problem was I could not go back to the campus because they wanted to know what my footprint looked like. I was like, what do you mean by footprint? And they said, well, how many people do you talk to a day? And I was like, well, I talk to a lot of people, 50, 100 maybe. And they're like, we're afraid if you talk to someone and you have COVID or you get it, and then you go talk to 15, 20, 30 more, you're going to shut production down. So stay home. Well, I did for 24 weeks. I would call Billy and be like, they won't let me go back. And, of course, they were going through their own shutdown, right? But I had been taken away from 550 people, and I didn't know what to do. But I came across this verse, Psalm 55:22. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. I just kept resting in that. Cast my burden. What is my burden? Well, what do you do when the unexpected happens? When you're a chaplain and your life is about being around people and serving people, and they go, oh, by the way, we don't want you to be around our people right now. All of a sudden, this unexpected happens, and so here was where I was at. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming for me. I know a lot of you dealt with it too, but I didn't see that coming. And so I was forced to stay home 24 weeks. I had no weekly fellowship lunch for 16 months, and I was unable to be present and around the people I serve. Now, there is a bright light to this. They kept paying me. So most people are like, what's the big deal, Donnie? Well, when you're called to do something, it doesn't matter if they still pay you. You're like, I need to do something. You know, I've painted everything in the house for my wife 4 times. Like, I've served her enough. Like, but what do you do? Like, you want to be around your people. You want to do your job. And so think about it. To be uncertain means to not know beyond doubt, not having certain knowledge of, or doing without that which could be problematic. And many of us during COVID, we're dealing with that, right? Churches, we're not even having services. So pastors were sitting home just like me. You know, what do we do? Well, I didn't know what to do. But I know that I had many uncertainties. Listen to this. Would I continue to be paid? That was one of my number one. Anybody else have that one? Would they still keep paying me? I remember once I called, at the time Marshall Carlson was the president, had a little chat with him. And I was like, hey, you got any idea when I may get to come back? And he goes, Donnie, don't y'all do sabbaticals? I said, well, yeah, but I didn't think there'd be a 24-week one. Like, just treat it like a sabbatical, right? And as much as I tried to process that, he said, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Matter of fact, everyone at Hendrick Motorsports was fine. Everyone was paid. No one lost a paycheck, right? But I still had that uncertainty. Am I going to be paid? Would the fellowship lunch ever start again? Think about it. Sometimes when things stop, it's hard to get them going again. I'm like, man, are we going to ever start that? That was a big part of what I do. How about, would employees I know die from COVID? Like, who's going to lose their life here? Because the way they were treating it is everybody's dying. Now, I did end up doing funerals for employees, family members who passed away from COVID. But thank the Lord, not one employee at Hendrick Motorsports lost their life to COVID through that whole process. But that was an uncertainty. Would I lose the relationships I had formed? Sight unseen, right? You talk about ministry of presence. I ain't present for 24 weeks. They're racing again. They're doing life, and they don't see Donnie anymore. I couldn't come on campus. Would MRO continue as a ministry? I know, right? It's a nonprofit. It needs people to support it, right? What does that look like for MRO? No MRO, then who am I connected or affiliated with? So these were my uncertainties and my concerns. Now, in those uncertainties, I knew, hey, I got to do something. You know, after a while, you can only do so much at home. So started doing a lot of things. Started talking to my cell phone and doing my fellowship lunch, Facebook Live, which I hated. I'm like, man, I don't want to. We were forced to do a lot of those things at MRO, right? I would sit down at my computer and email individually every employee and go, how are you doing, right? I would call and try to do lunch with people secretly because I didn't want to be seen by HR off campus with a bunch of employees. And then, God forbid, they get COVID, and then they blame me, right? So I was trying to do all these things to keep ministry going. At the time, I was working with many people with many different things going on in their lives, personal, health-wise, marital. I was trying to stay connected the best I could, but I'm going to just tell you, that's hard to do from home. You can only do so much. You can only text somebody so much. You can only call somebody so many times. And so I was in the midst of a ton of uncertainty, thinking like, man, when is this ever going to get back to normal? You know, and I know many people were doing that as well. But what does that look like for ministry? Well, as I would sit at home, I even did one thing where I would sit and stare at my phone and learned about lighting and how do you. A lot of us old people learn how to use some social media during the hard COVID days, and my kids helped me a lot. But I would just read the Bible for 5 minutes. I would do things like that, right? Wonder if is anybody viewing this? I'd sit there and read for 5 minutes. Thank y'all. Have a good day. You know, it's like post. Hope somebody's looking at it, right? And I went through like 7 books of the Bible like that. That's no joke, right? I know Nick was doing some things, some messages. I know Billy. Like we were just trying to do whatever we could do. There was a lot of uncertainty. Matter of fact, we didn't even see each other for a while. Like, I remember the first time we got back together, it was like a reunion. Or, oh, hey, you're still alive. But a lot of uncertainty. But as I was spending a lot of time studying, I came across in the scriptures, I was like, wait a minute. There's a lot of uncertainty in the Bible. Think about this. Think about Abraham, the uncertainty of leading a nation without a son. God chooses you. You're going to be this man of this great nation. And he can't have a son. It's like, wait a minute. Like, I need a son. He even doubted and went his own way there for a little bit, right? But he needed a son. Without a son, not happening. Some uncertainty there. How about Moses? The uncertainty of leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. You know, he didn't even want to do it, I don't think. It's like, why me, right? Pick somebody else. How about Joseph? The uncertainty after being sold into slavery. Boy, that's a confidence crusher, right? When your own family doesn't want you, your brothers. How about Joshua, the uncertainty when the people of Israel broke faith with God? You know, Moses doesn't even get there. He's like, it's all yours now, Joshua, right? Now Joshua's got to take over. And the people aren't exactly happy, right? They've been wandering in the desert. How about the uncertainty David had from a major moral failure? Times like, 2 or 3 there? Adultery, had a man killed, like the uncertainty of, man, what's that going to look like with my relationship with the Lord? How about Job, the uncertainty after the loss of his family? Poor Job. When you read the book of Job, that is just brutal. Think of the uncertainty he had. And then think of the disciples. You know, they've been hanging with Jesus, learning. You know, he dies, they kind of run off. He comes back alive. They're like, yes. And then he goes, oh, by the way, I'm leaving again. Wait a minute. The uncertainty of when he leaves and you're gonna spread my message to the world, right? The uncertainty of that. Somehow they all came through it, of all that uncertainty, right? And I think in ministry, there's always uncertainty. So I know for those of us that speak in front of people a lot, just the 30 minutes before it's happening, I hope people show up. Right? You guys that go or lead church, man, I hope people show up. The uncertainty of that, knowing good and well they're going to. Every week I'm like that. Man, I hope people show up. You know? As if somehow there were 100 people last week. Why aren't there going to be 100 this week? They're all just not going to come. But we walk around in this uncertainty, right? Well, one thing I've learned about, there's one consistency I have seen in uncertainty, right? Especially when we read about the uncertainty in the Bible. And they were faithful, and God was faithful to every promise he had for them. They were faithful. No matter what the uncertainty was, they were faithful. They pursued. They stayed on mission, right? And God fulfilled his promise. The people did get to the promised land, right? So God's promises get fulfilled. And so as I was thinking about that when I was out for this long COVID extended break, I just remember thinking, like, I got to stay on mission no matter what. I can't control a lot of the dynamics of when I'm going to get to come back or what this is going to look like. And so I would just do everything I could to try to serve and minister to the people that I was contracted to serve. And like I said, calling, emailing. We had a employee by the name of Bryce Whitson was in the middle of a 3-year battle with cancer. I couldn't get near him because he had no immune system. And I'd been walking weekly with him, trying to navigate his life and help him navigate cancer. I remember just calling everybody and was like, well, everybody's at home. I said, well, what do y'all think we just all meet in our cars and just drive by his house? I message everybody, and I'm like, meet me here. And I'm like, we're not on campus, so maybe I'll be okay. And I'm sitting there with the uncertainty, no one's going to show up, right? No one's showing up. They're busy. And the next thing you know, I have the line is so long, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to cause a traffic issue, and we're going to have to call the police, and everybody's going to be mad. And literally, we drove through Bryce's neighborhood with everybody honking and had these signs made. All these people did this on their own. And Bryce is standing out in the middle of his yard with his wife just crying because he hasn't seen anybody in months. He can't get near anybody. You know, and he's like, has everyone forgotten me? It's like, no, we haven't forgotten you. All we did was honk and drive by and see ya. That's it. Nobody could stop and talk to him. But the uncertainty, is anyone going to show up? Well, they did. Well, things like that I would do in the uncertainty, right? I remember once, some of you chaplains, this will be related to you. You know the people that you always go talk to and they give you 0 time of day? 0 time of day? Like, how you doing? They just walk by. Good, man. Have a good day. Right? When you're in workplace ministry with 550 people, you get that, okay? And then you start questioning yourself. What am I doing wrong? Is it the way I look? Is it the way I talk? What is it? And I remember an executive at HMS, I would go by and, you know, on his door, peek in. How you doing? Nothing. Hey, Donnie. That was it. Hey, have a good day. Have a good week. 2 years of that. 2 years of that. It got to the point where I was so uncertain about what's going on here that I was like, I'm just going to stop going. I'm not going to make that on my route. But I still would, right? One day I get back to my office and I get an email and it's from him. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. He emailed me. And he says, hey, Donnie, so my dad had a surgery a couple days ago and he's not doing well. He's up in the hospital, and he's been saying some things that concern me about his health, about his life, not wanting to live. He goes, would you mind going up to the hospital and just encouraging him? I'm like, okay. So I started doing that. About every other day, I would go up there and walk in his room, and I introduced myself to him, and he says, oh, I know who you are. And I'll say, oh, okay, great. And I'll spend every other day for like 2 weeks talking to him. And it came to the day of Christmas. He was in a lot of pain. This man was in a lot of pain. He was suffering a lot. I would go to therapy with him. But it was Christmas Day. We were kind of finished at my house. And so I told my wife, I'm going to go see so-and-so at the hospital and just encourage. It's Christmas, right? It's Christmas. He's got to be laying there like hating life right now. So I go and see him. But when I walk into his room, the executive from HMS is in his room, his son. And he looks at me and goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, you asked me to come encourage your dad. So me and him been meeting like every other day. He goes, Donnie, it's Christmas. I said, I know, but I'm like done with my kids for today. Like I needed a break, you know, tried to make it jovial. And, but he was blown away that I was there. Talked to his dad. He would always let me pray with him. And then I would wait another day, and then the next day I was going to go. And then he called me, his son. And he said, Dad passed away this morning. And I thought, I was hoping to get back and see him again. And said, you know, not knowing a lot about the son's faith, knew his dad's because I got to talk to him a lot. I said, well, listen, you know, I'm sorry that your dad had to go through that, but your dad knew the Lord. He loved the Lord. And I said, if I can serve you in any way, give me a call. Another day went by, then he gave me a call and said, Donnie, thank you. We're doing all this for the service, and we want you to be part of, officiating his service. And I'm thinking, okay, thank you. That's an honor, right? Well, this gentleman's dad was a very high up profile person. I'm not using his name, but I was nervous and I was uncertain. I was like, man, I've never been in front of all these VIP people, you know. And so I ended up, it was great. The service was great. I made a great friend out of it who actually after that would let me come in his office and hang out and pray with him. But I remember the uncertainty of that, of just, why won't he talk to me? What have I done? And I remember one day a pit crew guy, you got to give those guys credit. I was talking about some things that had to do with uncertainty, and he goes, Donnie, it's not you. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, it's your title. I said, well, what do you mean by my title? He goes, they don't believe what you believe. So when you walk around, they get a little bit on edge. They can't cuss no more. They can't do this. I was like, I've never told anybody. They're like, oh, no, you don't understand, man. When you walk around, you're the man of the cloth. And I was like, I don't dress like I'm the man of the cloth. And they're like, well, no, but that's the way they see you. And so I started learning that in all these uncertainties, God's really just asking us to do something. Just obey him and just stay on mission. Stay on mission. So listen to this. What can we learn from uncertainty in ministry? Well, God reminds us not to lean on our own understanding. Don't we see that in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6? Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll guide and direct your steps. So during COVID, when most people would be like, soak it up. You're getting paid. Enjoy yourself. Man, I was like, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to the office. I got to get back to the shop. Everything was uncertainty. God was telling me, stop leaning on your own understanding. Stop leaning on your own understanding. I got this. So I started relaxing a little more. Actually, my friend Bob here, we went to the mountains during COVID to get Gatlinburg. No one was there, right? But we went and hung out and tried to relax and soak it up. But I stopped leaning on my own understanding. I'm like, I guess they'll call me when they're ready for me to come back. How about this? God is always working for our good. Romans 8:28, right? If we love him, he's always working for our good. Maybe not right in the moment. We may not see it, but he is. We just got to trust him. We got to believe that something good is going to come out of this. And in this case, it was my uncertainty. And then we know that we stay on mission with what God has called us to do. We're always called to stay on mission. No matter what we're doing, we stay on mission. This employee has not talked to me for 3 years. Well, maybe he will tomorrow. Maybe he will tomorrow. Right? So that's what I do. I still got a handful I'm working on. Right? When I'm walking, they go that way. And I just... Right? Some I've just been bold and walked up and jovial. And I'm like, what is it? Is it my cologne? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. We haven't had a conversation in like 2 years. And they, hey, maybe tomorrow. Right? But we have to know that we got to stay on mission. And then God moves in uncertainty. Now, I'm going to close with Jesus' death because could you imagine that uncertainty? Everybody standing there watching while our leader's being crucified. Well, there you have it. All through the COVID 24 weeks, I'm complaining to my wife. She's doing a lot of listening, Bruce. Not talking, just listening. Man, maybe they don't want me there no more. Like, I'm complaining, it's terrible, right? And finally, it's August 10th, and a few days before that, we have an employee that is actually shot and killed. And they call me, you need to come back now. I sped down 485. I was like 24. I'm heading back to work. I couldn't wait to just walk in my office. And as soon as I got there, I had a shops full of broken people because one of our teammates had just lost his life. Ended up, soon as I get back, I'm in the middle of a funeral. Soon as I get back. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the hospital. My brother Bryce, his wife, Donnie, they want you to come to the hospital. And I'm having these conversations. Well, we can't get in the hospital. They won't let me in the hospital. You know, chaplains couldn't get in the hospital. Well, the doctor said, you need to come. They'll get you up here. So I go upstairs, and I spend that night and that morning saying the last words to my buddy. And he passes the next day. And I do that funeral. And I'm like, okay, welcome back. You know, trying to build relationships, talk to people. What have you done in the last 6 months? Well, I've been sitting at home. Why wouldn't they let you come back, you know? Going through all this, been complaining with my wife, and I get invited to a company function where they're going to give out awards. Now, I want you to understand in this story right here, as much as this is about me, it's really not about me. It's not about me. It's about what God does. And I'm invited to this awards thing where they give away watches and they give away the Papa Joe Hendrick Award, which is the biggest award you can get at Hendrick Motorsports in Hendrick Automotive Group. It's voted by peers. And so I'm supposed to go, but I'm off that day. Me not knowing at the moment, but they call and ask me to come do a prayer before it. So I was just glad to be around my teammates. And so I get in there. I watch them do all the deals. All the fancies are there, the Jimmy Johnsons, the Jeff Gordons, and Mr. Hendrick. And at the end, it's Papa Joe Award. Papa Joe. Somebody's getting the Papa Joe. That's a big deal. That's huge. They only give one away a year, and all the who's who's have it. Then they have someone come up, usually from that department that employee's in, to start talking about who this person is and where they're from and how long they've been at the company. And as this person's talking, he's from the engine department. So I'm like, oh, somebody from the engine department's getting it. And my work is done. And the more he talks, the more I realize, wait a minute, that sounds like me. So I'm getting nervous. And then it turns out it is me. And so now I got to go up and speak. Well, I don't know what to say. For once, I don't know what to say. But then when I get up there and I turn around, my whole family's standing there. My wife, my kids. And they have known for like 2 weeks. And so I'm a little emotional. And then my wife looks over at me and like winks at me. And I know what she's thinking. You remember all that fussing you was doing? So I'm honored. I'm humbled. I'm like, how did I get the Papa Joe Hendrick? I haven't been to work in 24 weeks. Like, how is this possible? And I'm going to tell you why it's possible. I never tried to win that award because here's the deal. Your peers vote on it. You can't determine what your peers are going to pick, if they like you or they don't, right? But they chose me. I wasn't even there for 24 weeks. They didn't even see me. But what I learned is this. Every little thing I did on that Facebook, all those emails, all those calls, all those getting my buddies to drive by my buddy's house, whatever I could do, they noticed it. Now, they never told me they noticed it, but they noticed it. They noticed it. And because they noticed it, they said, that's the guy right there. Now, does that mean that I'm special? No. I just stayed on mission. I stayed on mission, and it's almost like God says, watch this. Now, who here does not want affirmation in their life? Who does not want somebody to say, I see you. You're doing a good job. Well, I had 550 people say that, and I was sitting at home. Why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why it's important. Because there's always something going on in the uncertainty of ministry that we don't see that God is doing. We're called to stay on mission. Could you imagine the uncertainty that Joseph felt? And God's back there going, he's going to be leading them. He has no idea. Now it was like, what, 13 years or something? But right? He has no idea. They're going to be bowing down to him, and then he's going to rescue them. Right? Could you imagine the uncertainty? Joseph had no idea. Right? Could you imagine when everyone is standing there looking at Jesus on the cross, the uncertainty of, oh, what are they doing to our leader? And Jesus in his suffering and in his pain, and God's like, they have no idea. He's about to climb out of the grave. They have no idea. And you know how I know Jesus knew? Because he said, God forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Because he knew. He knew. I'm getting ready to come out of the grave and conquer every bit of this, right? And it's going to affirm everything that God has said in his word. And so I want to encourage you with this. There is always uncertainty in ministry. We finally got back going again at MRO. And we really got back going again. Matter of fact, we would just see each other in passing. You okay? You okay? Like so busy that like we didn't even have time to really stop and do anything, right? That fellowship lunch, we're back. We had 111 last week, right? We're back. Before COVID, we had no shop devotions. Now I have 9 and over 100 people coming to those. It took COVID to do that, right? I was uncertain they'd ever let me talk to anybody again, right? So be encouraged, right? Uncertainty, we're always going to be in that place. Whatever God's called you to do, stay on mission. Always stay on mission. And God will show you at some point, see, I told you I was going to do this. Stay on mission. So thank you. Stay on mission.